All right, so let's see here. So teacher certification, you already read that statement. So there's a couple great studies on this. You guys can look at that later. One of them on the right there was done by, in Maryland by Kate Walsh, who ultimately founded the National Council for Teacher Quality. So if you consider, when they do studies like, all right, do you need to be certified? The answer is no. At most, it adds a marginal value to have a teacher certification, right? 80% of education schools fail to prepare teachers for elementary math. 85% prepare to teach them in scientifically based reading. This is the scary one. Teachers are disproportionately the bottom third of college graduates. So SATs, class rank, doesn't matter how you look at it, that's what you're getting, right? Now, I tend to say, okay, I don't have scientific proof, but it's been my observation in the Frederick Classical Charter School, you got about the top 20 to 30% of the teachers are pretty good. It's the other 70 to 80% you got to worry about, right? So that's the challenge is, like I said, you want to improve a system, you got to improve the average teacher, right? The top, 10 to 30%, they're pretty good. How do you get the rest of them to raise their game and know these things? And these education schools, it's things like, I think I sent Nancy some examples of this. Like if you look at like Chinese teachers, and they've done studies on this, and they give them like fraction problems, and they give American teachers the same fraction problems and say, well, solve this problem and then explain it, like you explain it to a kid. The American teachers can't even do the problem, right? So it's like work rate problems and filling a barrel at such and such a rate, and those types of, they can't even conceive of how to set the problem up, right? The Chinese teachers, they set it up and they go and they solve the problem. They have not just one explanation, multiple explanations. So if you look at like, especially the Asian countries, those teachers really know, like math, for example, really, really well. They have higher expectations to teacher certification. So like if you're in South Korea and you want to become an elementary teacher, you're going to have to take calculus and topology and things that like a computer science guy would take, like me. Like they actually expect high things from their teachers, and the teachers can offer multiple different explanations because they know the math so well, right? So it's a very big weakness, unfortunately, in elementary schools, particularly in math. And I get it, everybody can't be an expert in everything, but they just don't have the same expectations as they do in other places. Sorry, in the back.
No, all I was going to say is I don't know a lot about this, but I read a study about how Japanese schools, they spend the first, I don't know if it's first through third or first through fifth, and they focus entirely upon developing self-esteem. That's it, nothing technical.
Right.
And it freaks me out, but it seems kids are coming out, obviously, and doing great. Have we looked at that at all? Because again, I know sometimes when pendulums swing too far to one side.
Yeah, they definitely do. Like Singapore math, I love Singapore math. We use it at the Frederick Classical Charter School. I would say the thing for math in general, whatever they're doing for self-esteem, I would say there are fewer topics covered in most other countries' math curriculum versus America. So America, you get the books and they're like this big, it's like a first grade book, and they view the book as like resources. It's like, oh, turn to page 13, turn to page 50, come up here, right? Singapore and the other math programs, like they're thinner books and you do them all, and you go in order because the whole thing's designed so you learn stuff on page 1 and then page 10 uses it, right? It makes sense, right? So American math tends to, it's like a staircase, and you want to make sure you have a solid first step so you can stand on that and then go to step 2 and 3 and 4. That's not how we're doing it. What we do is we offer exposure to kids in math so that you will actually have standards in Frederick County Public School that say student will gain exposure of long division. Student will gain exposure to the concept of multiplication. What do you mean gain exposure? If it's worth teaching, teach it to mastery one time, get that concept down, and then you use that to learn your next concept, right? But there's a lot of sort of, we dabble here, we dabble there. Same for history, it's kind of across all the subjects, right? It's like history. Oh, we'll do a unit on China. That was 3 weeks. Okay, well now we'll do a unit on France. What do they have to do with each other, right? It's not chronological. It's like we just pick random countries and we teach that there are other countries in the world, right? It's scattershot. So American approach is very scattershot. All right, and then high achieving graduates without formal training. So this is from Teach for America, which is a great program, still exists today. Well, they'll take Harvard and Yale and other like super elite universities. They'll throw them in with low-income kids, give them like a summer's worth of training, and guess what happens? They actually do better than the uncertified teachers, not just uncertified teachers, but also veterans and certified teachers. You take really smart people and you put them in really difficult circumstances teaching the lowest income kids, and they do better than the teachers who've been at that school for 10 years. brain power matters. So there's two things in teaching that are of the measurable attributes that actually matter. One is your verbal score on the SAT and what school did you go to. If your college is more selective, you are more likely to impact those kids effectively. If your SAT verbal score is high, because you're a good communicator probably, presumably that translates over into why, that would explain why that factor matters. Now, that's the measurable attributes. The unmeasurable attributes are things like attitude, personality, perseverance, are you willing to give up on kids, those things. Those unmeasurable attributes actually are most of what makes an effective teacher. But of the measurable attributes, it's verbal skills and selectivity of your undergraduate institution. I don't think Frederick County Public Schools is screened for that. I mean, when we did the Frederick Classical Charter School stuff, we were trying to look for all those qualities, all three categories. But we asked folks to submit their SAT scores because we want to see how they did, right? They didn't actually let us get their SAT scores. But I think they should screen for that. Why wouldn't you? If you have something that's at least it's an indicator, it's not determinative, but it's something to look at. Yes.
So, based on what you said, I'm trying to connect there's some similarities. Couple things. My boys, as you know, I homeschooled, then I went to Frederick Classical Charter School, then we went to public, then we went to Christian private, and we're back in public.
Right.
Okay, so.
You've been like me, you've been all over.
But what has helped me identify is that it genuinely doesn't mean anything other than your child, and I believe in what you're saying,
Right.
but at the end of the day,
Yeah.
it's the child itself. And if you think about it, so it's charter, public, private, Christian,
Right.
and back to public.
Yeah.
You would think that there are some inconsistencies. What has happened is that I had to identify that they went from private and they were 20 years behind in history
Right.
based on where they ended, because I
Right.
moved them mid-year.
Right.
So they were 20 years behind in history.
Right.
But they were extremely ahead in math
Right. Yeah.
and in language arts.
Yeah.
Okay, so,
That's common, by the way.
but it's not because of me. It's
Yeah.
not because of me.
Oh, no.
Or because what we're doing, we're not enriching our kids. It's based on this child. Those children have been kind of made that way from the get-go since
Right.
they came out.
And you might have followed a different history sequence. I mean, commonly the history is what gets messed up, right? Because
Right.
it's kind of whatever sequence you followed, maybe
The
you
school,
find it different
each
things.
school figures, we have these kids for a whole year.
Right.
As long as we finish them off.
Correct.
At that time, we're good. But if you pull them out in January, right
Correct.
after the midterm,
Yeah.
you find yourself that you're not in the same place.
Yep.
So that's my observation
For sure,
based on
yeah,
that,
for
okay? There's thriving in public school, which I figured, but I didn't know that they would be behind in certain things and ahead of them and others. But that's purely because of who they are, how their DNA is made. Then, the other concept I want to say is, being part of a Distinguished Young Women program, which is a scholarship program, I will attest 1,000,000% that when we give awards out to the Scholastic Award, which is who has the highest
Right.
scholastic scores, it's always the Asians. Always. So they're all going all to the same schools. But again, it just kind of either the parents are teaching them at home, which
Yeah, there's long-term data for FCPS for decades that show that pattern, that
It still shows
on
that.
average, right, Asian
Asian-
students do
So-
best, and it's tough Asians.
So we're talking about then the DNA, the nature versus nurture, because I can literally, just a month ago when I went to the Nationals for the Distinguished Young Women, 5 girls standing on stage, all of them Asians, and they all had a 4.3, 4, 5, 6, and go up.
Yeah,
And they all were given awards. So is it how they're made?
there's a bunch of factors, people have debated that for years, right? Obviously, there's a cultural component, depending on the culture of your family, and there's obviously a correlation. My Asian friends will tell me, hey, we really emphasize academics in our house, right? So there's definitely that. I don't know about the DNA. There's a guy, Frederick Guy, actually, Charles Murray was his name. He got in big trouble for having that as his premise, that he thought there were genetic differences that accounted for the differences in IQ.
I'm an outsider,
So-
I'm observing this.
Yeah, yeah,
And then the
so-
third observation I'm going to say is that in this county, when I run, and we're about to receive 18 girls from from Maryland, 18 girls from different counties that are coming as the distinguishing women of Maryland. We had last year and previously, last year we had 4 girls.
Right.
4 girls represent Frederick County, and they all came from Urbana. So, I'm just gonna say, within Frederick County, and I've been to, like I said, homeschool, Frederick Classical Charter School,
Right.
public, Christian, private, back to public. And all these girls that were representing Frederick County all came from Urbana. So
Yeah,
I-
and same for the sports teams too. Their Urbana sports teams tend to do it.
So